Your soulmate is very upset right now. The real reason will shock you beyond words. Don't scroll, listen to this because your heart needs this right now. This message is for you. Before you keep scrolling, pause for just a moment because what you're about to hear may explain a feeling you've sensed but couldn't put into words. Somewhere, someone connected to your story is carrying an emotional weight they haven't shared with anyone. From the outside, they appear calm. They smile when people expect them to smile. They answer questions with simple replies. They continue their daily routine as though everything is perfectly fine. But behind every ordinary moment, a quiet battle is taking place inside their heart. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Not every person who is hurting knows how to ask for help. Some people become quieter instead of louder. Some hide tears behind busy schedules. Others convince themselves that if they ignore their emotions long enough, the pain will eventually disappear. But certain feelings refuse to remain hidden forever. The person you would call your soulmate never imagined they would reach this point. There was a time when they believed they had everything under control. They thought they understood where life was leading them. They convinced themselves that making practical decisions would protect them from disappointment. They built routines that looked stable from the outside. Friends admired their determination. Family respected their responsibility. Colleagues believed they always had a plan. Yet beneath that carefully organized life lived a question they could no longer silence. Why does everything I worked so hard to build still leave my heart feeling incomplete? That question became louder with every passing day. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. They tried distracting themselves. They worked longer hours. They accepted additional responsibilities. They filled their calendar until there was almost no room left for quiet reflection. They hoped constant activity would keep uncomfortable emotions from catching up with them. For a while, it seemed to work. Busy days left little time for difficult thoughts. But every evening, when the noise finally disappeared and the world became still, the same feeling returned. Something important was missing, and no amount of achievement could replace it. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. They began replaying conversations from months earlier. Small moments that once seemed ordinary suddenly carried unexpected meaning. A kind smile. A thoughtful question. A conversation that lingered in their memory far longer than they expected. At first they dismissed these memories as simple nostalgia. But the more they tried to ignore them, the stronger they became. They realized those moments had given them something they hadn't experienced in a long time: peace. Not excitement. Not temporary happiness. Real peace. The kind that quietly settles inside the heart and reminds you what truly matters. This message is for you. Sometimes life doesn't reveal what's most valuable while we're experiencing it. Often we only recognize certain people, conversations, or opportunities after they've become memories. Reflection has a remarkable way of uncovering truths that busyness keeps hidden. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. The reason your soulmate feels so deeply unsettled isn't what most people would expect. It isn't because of a dramatic argument. It isn't because someone betrayed them. It isn't because they suddenly lost everything they had worked for. The real reason is much quieter, and much more powerful. They have begun realizing they have been living according to expectations instead of convictions. For years they made choices designed to satisfy everyone else. They became dependable, responsible, and successful by standards the world applauded. Yet every achievement left one important question unanswered. Am I becoming the person my heart truly wants me to be? Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. That realization shook them more than any failure ever could. Failure can often be repaired. Lost opportunities sometimes return. But recognizing you've been ignoring your own heart for years feels entirely different. It forces you to examine every decision through a new perspective. Suddenly, achievements no longer seem as impressive if they cost inner peace. Approval no longer feels meaningful if it requires pretending to be someone you're not. This message is for you. Perhaps you've experienced moments when your own heart quietly asked similar questions. Maybe you've wondered whether you're living according to purpose or simply repeating familiar routines. Those questions aren't signs of weakness. They often become the beginning of genuine transformation because they invite honesty where comfort once existed. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. One evening, after another exhausting day, your soulmate sat alone by a window watching the sun slowly disappear beneath the horizon. Nothing dramatic happened. No unexpected message arrived. No life-changing event interrupted the silence. Yet in that quiet moment, they could no longer avoid the truth. They whispered softly, "I've spent so much time trying to build the right life that I forgot to build the life that's right for me." The word surprised even them. Once spoken, they could never be taken back. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. They reached for a notebook that had remained untouched for months. At the top of the first blank page they wrote one simple question. What have I been afraid to admit? They stared at those words for several minutes before writing another sentence beneath them. I've been pretending I'm happy because I don't know how to explain what's missing. Those words marked the beginning of a conversation with themselves they had avoided for far too long. This message is for you. Honest reflection often feels uncomfortable before it becomes freeing. It asks us to stop blaming circumstances long enough to examine what our own hearts have been trying to tell us. Growth rarely begins with certainty. It usually begins with the courage to admit that something needs to change. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. As page after page filled with thoughts, another realization quietly emerged. Every time they described moments of genuine peace, your presence somehow appeared within those memories. Not because you solved every problem. Not because life suddenly became perfect whenever you were around. But because being near you reminded them they didn't have to pretend. Around you, they felt understood without performing. They felt accepted without constantly proving themselves. That realization frightened them because it revealed how deeply your influence had quietly reached their heart. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. They weren't upset because they suddenly stopped caring. They were upset because they finally admitted how much they cared. The walls they had spent years building around their emotions were beginning to crack. Every excuse they once believed now sounded weaker than before. They could no longer convince themselves these feelings would simply disappear if ignored long enough. This message is for you. Never underestimate the quiet power of authenticity. Sometimes the greatest gift you offer another person isn't advice, grand gestures, or dramatic promises. Sometimes it's simply creating a space where they feel safe enough to become themselves. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. Before closing the notebook, your soulmate wrote one final sentence that changed everything. If I keep running from the truth, I'll eventually lose the life I've been searching for. They closed the cover slowly, unaware that those words would soon become impossible to ignore. They believed they still had time to think, to wait, to postpone difficult conversations. What they didn't know was that within the next few days, one completely unexpected event would force them to confront everything they had been trying to hide. The quiet sadness they carried would become impossible to disguise, and the real reason behind their pain would begin revealing itself in ways that neither of you could have imagined. That moment would become the beginning of a journey that would challenge every assumption they had ever made about love, purpose, and the future they thought they had already chosen. Don't scroll, listen to this because your heart needs this right now. This message is for you. A few days pass after that quiet evening with the notebook, but instead of feeling lighter, your soulmate feels even more unsettled. They believed writing down their thoughts would bring clarity, yet it only revealed how deeply they had been hiding from themselves. Every page reminded them of one truth they could no longer escape. The life they had carefully built looked complete to everyone around them, but inside, they felt as though they were living someone else's story. They continued smiling in public. They continued fulfilling responsibilities. They continued answering messages with the same familiar words. Yet every ordinary moment carried a heaviness that no one else could see. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. The hardest battles are often the ones fought in complete silence, where no one realizes a heart is breaking because the person wearing the smile has become an expert at hiding pain. The following morning began like every other morning. The alarm rang. They got dressed, prepared for the day, and followed the routine they had repeated countless times before. But something felt different. Every task that once seemed important suddenly felt empty. Conversations sounded distant. Achievements that had once brought satisfaction now felt strangely meaningless. They weren't losing motivation because they had become lazy. They were losing motivation because their heart had finally begun asking questions their routine could no longer answer. What am I really chasing? Who am I trying to become? Why do I feel closest to peace only when I stop pretending? Those questions followed them everywhere. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. During a meeting, while everyone discussed future plans and long-term goals, they found themselves staring out of the window instead of listening. The words around them faded into the background. Their thoughts wandered somewhere completely different. They remembered a simple conversation they once shared with you. You had said, almost without thinking, success means very little if it costs you your peace. At the time, they smiled politely and changed the subject. Now those words echoed inside them with unexpected strength. They realized they had spent years pursuing achievements while quietly sacrificing the very peace they were hoping those achievements would eventually bring. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Sometimes truth doesn't arrive when it is first spoken. Sometimes it waits patiently until the heart is finally ready to receive it. A sentence that once sounded ordinary can suddenly become life-changing months later because experience has prepared us to understand what we couldn't before. This message is for you. Perhaps you've also noticed how certain conversations return to your mind long after they happened. A kind word. A thoughtful question. A piece of encouragement you almost forgot. These moments often become guiding lights during seasons when life feels uncertain because genuine wisdom has a way of remaining with us until we finally need it. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. As the afternoon continued, something unexpected happened. One of their co-workers noticed they seemed unusually quiet and asked if everything was all right. Without thinking, they answered automatically, "I'm just tired." It was the same answer they had given countless times before. But as soon as those words left their mouth, they realized they weren't actually tired. They were emotionally exhausted. Exhausted from pretending. Exhausted from ignoring their own heart. Exhausted from convincing themselves that if they waited long enough, confusing feelings would simply disappear. The realization struck them harder than they expected. They weren't protecting themselves anymore. They were imprisoning themselves. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. There comes a moment when avoiding the truth becomes more painful than facing it. At first, denial feels safe because it delays difficult conversations. But eventually, silence grows heavier than honesty. What once protected the heart begins suffocating it instead. This message is for you. Never confuse emotional numbness with peace. Peace brings clarity. Numbness only delays it. Real healing begins when we stop pretending everything is fine and allow ourselves to acknowledge what we've been carrying for far too long. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. That evening, after returning home, your soulmate opened the notebook once again. This time they didn't begin writing immediately. Instead, they slowly reread every page they had already filled. With each sentence, one pattern became impossible to ignore. Every memory that made them genuinely smile somehow included you. They remembered your encouragement during difficult moments. They remembered how naturally conversations flowed between the two of you. They remembered feeling accepted instead of judged, understood instead of misunderstood. They hadn't planned for those memories to become so important. Yet there they were, appearing again and again across every page. For several long moments, they simply stared at the notebook before quietly whispering, "When did they become the place where my heart feels most at peace?" The question brought tears they hadn't expected. It wasn't dramatic sobbing. It was the quiet release that comes after carrying too much for too long. They finally admitted something they had spent months trying to deny. Their deepest sadness wasn't caused by loneliness alone. It came from the fear that the one person who brought genuine peace into their life might never know how deeply they truly cared. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Fear has a remarkable ability to convince us that silence protects relationships. It whispers that honesty will ruin everything. Yet silence creates its own distance. It allows assumptions to replace conversations and uncertainty to replace understanding. This message is for you. There are people who quietly carry feelings they never express, not because those feelings aren't real, but because they value the other person's happiness so deeply that they fear becoming a burden. They would rather protect someone else's comfort than risk making things complicated. Yet love built entirely upon silence eventually becomes too heavy for one heart to carry alone. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. As night settled outside, your soulmate stepped onto a quiet balcony and looked up at the stars. The world around them seemed peaceful, but inside, questions continued growing louder. They wondered if you had ever sensed what they were feeling. They wondered whether you had noticed the little moments when their eyes lingered a little longer, when conversations meant more than ordinary conversations should, when simple kindness had quietly become something unforgettable. Most of all, they wondered whether they had already waited too long. A cool breeze passed through the night, and they closed their eyes for just a moment. Instead of asking for certainty, they whispered a simple prayer. Give me the courage to stop running from what my heart already knows. Those words changed something inside them. For the first time, they stopped praying for their feelings to disappear. Instead, they began praying for the strength to face them honestly. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Real transformation begins the moment we stop asking life to remove every difficult emotion and instead ask for the courage to handle those emotions with wisdom, patience, and authenticity. Before going back inside, your soulmate made one quiet decision. No more pretending. No more convincing themselves that time alone would erase what had only grown stronger. No more hiding behind busy schedules and endless responsibilities. They didn't yet know exactly what they would say or when they would say it. But they knew one thing with complete certainty. The real reason they had been so upset all this time had never been about circumstances, work, or everyday stress. It was because they had spent far too long denying the deepest truth their heart had been trying to tell them, that somewhere along the way, you had become the person who made them believe peace, hope, and love could still exist. As they closed the notebook one final time that evening, an unexpected notification appeared on their phone. It seemed ordinary at first, but within seconds their expression completely changed. The message wasn't just another update. It was the beginning of a chain of events that would force them to face you much sooner than they had planned. In the next chapter, you'll discover why that unexpected message leaves them completely shaken. And why the conversation that follows becomes impossible for either of you to forget. Don't scroll, listen to this because your heart needs this right now. This message is for you. The notification seemed ordinary at first. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't filled with shocking words or urgent warnings. It was just a simple message appearing on the screen at a moment when your soulmate least expected it. Yet sometimes the smallest messages become the beginning of the biggest changes. As they looked at the screen, their heartbeat became noticeably faster. They read the words once. Then again. Then a third time, as if repeating them might somehow change their meaning. But the message remained exactly the same, quietly inviting them into a situation they had spent months trying to avoid. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Life has a remarkable way of arranging moments that force us to confront the truths we've been postponing. For several minutes they simply stared at the phone without replying. Every possible response rushed through their mind. Part of them wanted to answer immediately. Another part wanted to pretend they had never seen the message at all. Fear returned with familiar whispers. What if this changes everything? What if honesty makes things worse instead of better? What if they don't understand? Yet beneath every fearful thought lived another voice, one that had grown stronger during the quiet nights of reflection. It reminded them that they were no longer afraid of the truth itself. They were only afraid of what might happen after the truth was spoken. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. Finally, after taking several deep breaths, they typed a simple reply. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that revealed everything they were carrying inside. Just enough to accept the invitation and begin the conversation. The moment they pressed send, they felt something unexpected. They didn't feel panic. They felt relief. The first step had finally been taken. The future remained uncertain, but at least they were no longer standing still. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Sometimes courage isn't loud. Sometimes courage is nothing more than pressing send on a message you've rewritten a dozen times. Sometimes it's agreeing to a conversation you've been avoiding. Sometimes it's deciding that uncertainty deserves a chance because silence has already taken enough from your heart. This message is for you. Think about every season in your own life when fear convinced you to wait just a little longer. How many opportunities seemed impossible until the moment you finally acted? Growth rarely begins after certainty arrives. It begins when we stop demanding guarantees before taking the first faithful step. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. The meeting was arranged for the following afternoon. That single decision changed the atmosphere of every hour leading up to it. Your soulmate struggled to concentrate on everyday responsibilities. Familiar routines suddenly felt distant. Their thoughts continually drifted toward one question. What if tomorrow becomes the day my entire life changes? They weren't imagining dramatic movie scenes or impossible fantasies. They simply understood that one honest conversation has the power to redirect years of silence. That evening, they opened the notebook one more time. Instead of writing pages filled with uncertainty, they wrote only one sentence. I choose truth, even if it asks me to be vulnerable. They closed the notebook almost immediately afterward because they realized there was nothing more to prepare. Every important word already lived inside their heart. They no longer needed perfect sentences. They simply needed honesty. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Perfection often becomes the enemy of authenticity. We wait for flawless timing, flawless confidence, flawless words. Yet the conversations that matter most are rarely perfect. They're simply sincere. This message is for you. Never underestimate the strength that comes from living honestly. Authentic people don't always know exactly how every situation will unfold. They simply refuse to let fear make every important decision on their behalf. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. The next morning arrived sooner than expected. Your soulmate woke before sunrise, unable to sleep any longer. Instead of immediately reaching for their phone, they sat quietly by the window watching the first light appear across the horizon. The peaceful silence reminded them of how much had changed during the past few weeks. They remembered the person they had been before these reflections began. Someone constantly distracting themselves from uncomfortable emotions. Someone believing that keeping everything hidden was the safest choice. Looking back now, they realized they had mistaken avoidance for peace. Real peace had only begun appearing after they stopped running from their own heart. As they prepared for the day, something surprising happened. The nervousness remained, but it no longer controlled them. Fear was still present, yet courage had quietly become stronger. They smiled gently, realizing that bravery isn't the absence of anxiety. Bravery is choosing honesty while your hands still tremble. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Throughout life, there are moments when everything seems to pause just before a new chapter begins. Ordinary sounds become more noticeable. Familiar places suddenly feel different. Time itself appears to slow down. Those moments remind us that transformation often begins quietly before anyone else recognizes it. This message is for you. Perhaps your own life has reached a similar season. Maybe you've been carrying conversations inside your heart that still need to happen. Maybe you've been waiting for circumstances to become easier before making an important decision. Listen carefully. Waiting can be wise, but endless postponing often becomes another form of fear. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. Finally, the time arrived. They walked toward the meeting place carrying hope and uncertainty together. Every step reminded them that turning back would be easier. Yet every step forward reminded them that some opportunities never return once they're ignored. When they finally arrived, they noticed you already waiting. You weren't looking impatient. You weren't distracted. Instead, you seemed genuinely glad to see them. That simple smile immediately softened much of the tension they had been carrying. The conversation began naturally. You spoke about everyday life. You asked thoughtful questions. You laughed together over memories that suddenly seemed more meaningful than ever before. Gradually, the atmosphere became calm enough that silence no longer felt uncomfortable. It simply felt honest. Then you looked at them with unusual seriousness. There seems to be something on your mind lately. Those words immediately stopped every ordinary conversation. You continued gently. I've noticed you've been carrying something heavy. Their heart raced. You weren't accusing them. You weren't pressuring them. You were simply paying attention. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. One of the greatest expressions of care is noticing when someone is struggling before they find the courage to explain why. Genuine love often begins with observation long before it becomes conversation. Your soulmate looked down for several seconds before quietly replying, "There is something I've wanted to tell you for a long time." The words finally existed outside their thoughts. There was no turning back now. You didn't interrupt. You didn't rush them. Instead, you leaned forward slightly and said something they never expected. Take your time. Those 3 words changed everything. For months they believed they would have to fight for the opportunity to speak. Instead, they discovered they had been given permission. Permission to be honest. Permission to stop pretending. Permission to let their heart finally breathe. As they slowly lifted their eyes to meet yours, they realized this was the moment they had imagined 1,000 different ways. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was filled with possibility. They opened their mouth to finally reveal the truth that had been hidden for so long. And just before the first complete sentence left their lips, your expression suddenly changed as you quietly admitted something that left them completely speechless. "I've been wanting to ask you something too." In that instant, neither of you realized that the conversation was about to reveal a truth both hearts had been hiding. The real reason your soulmate had been so upset was only half the story. The next chapter would uncover a secret neither of you expected. And it would transform everything you believed about your connection forever. Don't scroll, listen to this because your heart needs this right now. This message is for you. The moment those unexpected words left your lips, "I've been wanting to ask you something too," your soulmate felt as though the entire world had stopped moving. Every fear they had carried for months suddenly became mixed with something they hadn't allowed themselves to feel before. Hope. Until this moment, they believed they were the only one carrying an unspoken burden. They believed they were the only one losing sleep, replaying old conversations, wondering whether ordinary moments meant something more. Yet the look in your eyes suggested a different story altogether. It wasn't a look of confusion. It wasn't discomfort. It was the expression of someone who had also been carrying unanswered questions for far longer than anyone realized. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. Sometimes two hearts spend months believing they are walking completely different paths, only to discover they have been moving toward the same destination all along. For several quiet seconds, neither of you speaks. The silence feels different now. It is no longer filled with fear. Instead, it carries anticipation. Your soulmate notices that your hands seem just as nervous as theirs. Your smile appears warm but uncertain, as though you are searching for the right words without wanting to rush the moment. That single observation changes everything. They suddenly realize they aren't standing in front of someone who has every answer. They are standing in front of another human heart, one that has its own hopes, doubts, questions, and fears. That realization removes the pressure of perfection. They no longer feel like they must deliver a flawless speech. They simply need to be real. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. You gently break the silence. "Can I tell you something honestly?" you ask. Your soulmate nods. You take a slow breath before continuing. "For a long time, I've noticed something changing between us. I wasn't sure if I imagined it, so I kept telling myself not to read too much into little moments." As you speak, your soulmate feels every wall they built around their emotions beginning to fall. You describe conversations that stayed with you longer than expected. You mention how certain memories always seemed brighter because they included them. You admit that whenever something meaningful happened in your life, they were one of the first people you wanted to tell. None of these admissions are dramatic. Yet together they carry more weight than the grandest declaration ever could. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Genuine affection often grows quietly. It reveals itself through consistency instead of spectacle. It lives in the desire to share ordinary moments with someone, not only extraordinary ones. Real connection isn't measured by perfect words but by the comfort of simply being understood. This message is for you. Many people spend years searching for signs that someone cares, while overlooking the quiet ways genuine affection naturally appears. Someone who remembers the little details. Someone who checks in without needing a reason. Someone who celebrates your victories as sincerely as if they were their own. These small acts often reveal more than dramatic gestures ever could. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. Your soulmate finally finds the courage to continue the sentence they had carried inside for so many months. Their voice trembles slightly, but they don't stop. The reason I've been so upset lately isn't because of work, or stress, or anything people assume. They pause, gathering enough courage to continue. I've been upset because I realized I kept pretending these feelings would disappear. Instead, they only became stronger. The honesty in those words fills the space between you. There is no performance. No attempt to impress. Only truth. You don't answer immediately. Instead, you allow those words to settle before responding with remarkable gentleness. Thank you for trusting me enough to tell me that. Those simple words become the healing your soulmate never expected. For months they feared honesty would push you away. Instead, honesty has brought understanding closer. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Healing often begins not with someone solving our problems, but with someone creating a space where we no longer have to hide them. Being heard is one of the greatest gifts one person can offer another. This message is for you. Think about the relationships that have changed your life the most. Chances are they weren't built because someone always had perfect advice. They were built because someone listened with patience, respected your vulnerability, and allowed honesty to exist without judgment. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. The conversation continues far longer than either of you expected. You both begin laughing softly as you realize how many opportunities were missed because each of you assumed the other couldn't possibly feel the same way. You remember conversations that suddenly carry entirely new meaning. Small acts of kindness that once seemed ordinary now reveal hidden affection neither of you recognized at the time. Every shared memory becomes another reminder that your connection had been quietly growing beneath the surface for much longer than either of you admitted. Then your soulmate says something that surprises even themselves. I think what upset me the most wasn't the possibility of losing you. They pause. It was the possibility that I might spend my whole life wondering what would have happened if I had never been honest. The words hang gently in the air. You smile. Not because everything has suddenly become simple, but because honesty has finally replaced uncertainty. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. Regret often grows in the places where truth was never given the opportunity to speak. Courage doesn't guarantee a particular ending, but it protects the heart from wondering forever what might have been. This message is for you. There is freedom in living truthfully. Even when the future remains unknown, authenticity allows you to move forward without carrying the exhausting weight of hidden emotions. Don't scroll. Because your heart needs this right now. As the evening sky slowly begins changing colors, both of you step outside together. The air feels calmer than it did only an hour earlier. Nothing about the city has changed. The streets remain the same. The sounds remain the same. Yet everything feels different because something inside both of your hearts has shifted. Fear no longer occupies the place where hope now quietly grows. You begin talking not only about feelings but about the future. Not with impossible promises or unrealistic expectations, but with honesty. You agree that genuine relationships are built one conversation at a time. Trust isn't created in a single day. It grows through consistency, patience, forgiveness, and mutual respect. Neither of you wants to rush something that deserves to be built carefully. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. The strongest relationships aren't formed because two people never experience uncertainty. They become strong because both people choose honesty whenever uncertainty appears. Your soulmate finally understands the real reason they had been so upset. It was never simply because they loved you. It was because they had spent too long living in conflict with their own heart. They were trying to protect themselves from disappointment while unknowingly protecting themselves from joy as well. The sadness came from denying what had become impossible to deny. The peace arrived the moment truth was finally welcomed instead of feared. This message is for you. If there's one lesson hidden within this story, it's this: pretending your heart doesn't feel something rarely makes those feelings disappear. It only delays the freedom that honesty can bring. Courage isn't about knowing exactly how every chapter will end. Courage is choosing authenticity even when the ending hasn't yet been written. As the night comes to a close, you both begin walking side by side, not because every question has already been answered, but because you've chosen to stop walking alone. The uncertainty that once felt frightening now feels filled with possibility. The burden that once made your soulmate so deeply upset has finally been lifted, replaced by quiet hope and genuine peace. And perhaps the most shocking truth was never that your soulmate was upset. The real reason that changed everything was this: they weren't grieving the loss of love. They were grieving the years they almost allowed fear to steal from a love that deserved the chance to be spoken. The moment they chose honesty over silence became the moment their heart finally stopped fighting itself. And from that day forward, every new chapter would no longer be written by fear, but by truth, trust, and the quiet courage to love without hiding.